The Apple Watch Series 6 and the Fitbit Sense are the top smartwatches heading towards 2021. And of course, next year is going to be an interesting year for everyone because everybody wants to keep fit more than ever, more than this year actually. So because of these two top smartwatches, both of them can do everything from tracking your steps to your sleep. It can track your heart rate, can monitor your workouts, and of course look at your general health and well-being. So if you are thinking about getting one or the other, let's work out which one is right for you. The Apple Watch 6 starts at 1,750 ringgit for the GPS version and 2,200 ringgit for the GPS and cellular version, and only works on an iPhone. That goes without saying. But the Fitbit Sense, however, starts at 1,500 ringgit and works on both Android and iPhone. However, later on, I'll be able to explain to you there are some issues with some of the functionalities on Fitbit Sense working on an iPhone or an iOS device. Not all the full functions can be enjoyed, but we'll jump to that later. So in comparison, I'm going to be breaking down some of the features of all these watches have, everything from battery life to performance and design, and of course the look and feel of the devices. We'll do the appearances later because the main reason you want to get these watches is of course because of the fitness aspect of it. So the electrocardiogram or the ECG app is available on these watches, but there's a huge disclaimer here. This is the only US FDA approved function for these watches, but these watches do provide all the other sensors as well. But the other sensors aren't medically cleared by any professional body in the US or in Malaysia. So it is important that you should know that you should not use any form of data from any of these devices as a substitute to replace proper medical care advice. So before we move on any further, these kind of sensors are just always to give you an idea of what your body is going through right now, but just to make sure that you get the proper medical advice, do visit your doctor and always go to your doctors for that. So this is just a guidance to give you on an idea of what is going on with your body. Now, so that out of the way, let's talk about the blood oxygen saturation levels or the SpO2 levels, because both of these watches do give you an idea of what that might look like for you. On the Apple Watch Series 6, there's a couple of ways that can give you an SpO2 reading. You can do a spot reading on demand. You can also do a background measurement throughout the day and while you sleep. The Fitbit Sense only takes SpO2 reading while you sleep, and in the morning about 45 minutes to an hour after you wake up, you will see a percentage on your screen as well as a range of which the SpO2 feel between as you were sleeping overnight. Speaking of sleep, both of these watches also track your sleep when you wear them to bed. The sleep tracking is probably the most substantial difference between these two health tracking features of these two watches, because the Fitbit Sense, at least in my opinion, is incredibly detailed in the information that it gives to you. It has data on breathing, heart rate and respiration. It has your heart rate variability and things like restlessness and stuff like that. Of course, there's so much data and richness that goes into these kind of data that allows you to understand better how you actually go to bed and how you spend your time in the bed. It gives you a sleep score which rates your sleep out of 100 in terms of the quality of sleep. So the higher the score, the better your sleep. For me, I've been averaging about 75. Quite honestly, I don't know how to hit 100, but those are the kind of readings that you're going to get with the Fitbit Sense. The Apple Watch Series 6 isn't as detailed if compared against the Fitbit Sense for sleep. In fact, the user interface of the sleep function is the same for the Apple Watch Series 6 as it is for the previous watch series. That is consistent and familiar if you've been using the Apple Watch for some time now. And it is mostly concentrated on duration of your sleep and perhaps your awakeness and your sleepness time. So when you wake up in the morning, it shows you how much you have slept and if there's interruptions between that sleeping period that you have. You'll be able to see the SpO2 reading as well and your heart rate throughout the night. But this is the thing about the Apple Watch, if you haven't gotten accustomed used to it. You need a lot of battery life in order for your Apple Watch Series 6 to work while it's sleeping. In fact, you'll need at least 30% battery life on your Apple Watch Series 6 or Series 5 or Series 4 for that matter in order for you to track your sleep. Now, let's face it, most information will come to you from both type of devices. But if you come back from work and your battery is already down a certain percentage, let's say 50%, 60%, you got to do that little thing where you have to charge it before going to bed, wear it, wake up, charge it again before you go to work. That, of course, is cumbersome, but you know, if you have been doing it for years like me, you tend to ignore that fact after a while. So most information will come from the Fitbit Sense compared against the Apple Watch, but it will cost you because the Fitbit Sense using the app, the free version, doesn't give you that kind of detail. Now, we have to talk a little bit more about Fitbit Premium, which will cost you about 40 ringgit a month when you get your Fitbit Sense. But because of the purchase of the Fitbit Sense, you do get first 6 months free, but it'll cost you afterwards. So think about it as 40 times 12. That's about 500 bucks or 480 bucks. It's going to cost you for that extra additional item on top of the device itself. Something to think about when you do go after the Fitbit Sense. These kind of devices also have add-on fees in terms of changing the watch faces, all that third-party stuff. Those might incur some costs as well. So those are the additional costs that are going to be involved with using a Fitbit Sense. But with the Apple Watch, you don't get this kind of additional costs that comes afterwards. For that matter, the Apple Watch, there isn't any additional first-party app that will cost you extra. But of course, when you move from one app to another, you might get third-party apps on the Apple App Store that might give you a different form of information, and perhaps there might be some information, there might be some payment that would be related to that. The Apple Watch Series 6 is the only one between the two that has sound detection. It detects the kind of decibels that you have around you. It also gives you a warning if things get a little bit too loud that might damage your hearing. It is also the only one between the two to have fall detection, and also has the ability to call emergency services if you have programmed the emergency services in. There's also a temperature sensor that can only be found on the Apple Watch. In fact, I've walked into a walk-in freezer once and I didn't even realize that there was a temperature setting, and I got a warning that I was in a very cold situation and need to get out of that place very fast. It gives out a loud buzz, so that was an interesting episode that I didn't even realize I even knew that I had that kind of sensor on the Apple Watch. But the Fitbit Sense has two other sensors that you might be interested in that might not be well pronounced in the Apple Watch Series 6. The first is the skin temperature sensor. This doesn't give you a spot reading like 36 or 37 degrees Celsius of your body, but instead it gives you an idea if you are a little bit warmer or a little bit cooler than you normally are, above or below your baseline temperature. So this might be useful in trying to detect something like fevers or raises in temperature or cycle changes for women. And the other sensor, between the only one that can be found on the Fitbit Sense that is not found on the Apple Watch, is the stress reading. This is called an EDA, or an electrodermal activity sensor. The EDA detects what's new to the changes in my sweat when I put my palm over the watch face to take an EDA or stress reading. This gives you a stress management score, again out of 100, just like your sleep score, to let you know how you are responding to stress. This score takes into account your activity levels and your sleep levels and your heart rate variability, and the result from that, it gives you a stress sensing announcement or information. How you make this good for you, or how are you going to react towards this, I'm not too sure. So it does sound great in theory in terms of knowing your stress levels, but you really can't really make do with this information. In fact, if you are indeed undergoing a stressful day, for instance, and you do get a high EDA score or stress score on your Fitbit Sense, perhaps that might be one way of modulating your behavior and try to understand on how you should tone down your stress on those days. That's the only thing that I can see coming up from the usability of the stress sensor. But still, perhaps this is something that Fitbit can work on and improve in future models. So now let's move on to the workouts. On the Apple Watch, there's over 40 types of workouts. You can choose anywhere from badminton to yoga and all the other stuff. On the Fitbit Sense, there's about 20 types, typical ones that you can expect, including walking, running, all that. Of course, you can also program the kind of activities that you do on both watches and program it to a point where you can name those kind of exercises if it's not in the template settings that you have already set there. Now, both have the ability to detect workouts, so you still get credit for them even if you forget to start a workout, like for instance an outdoor walking, an outdoor running, for example. And these watches also have a built-in GPS, so that means you don't need to bring your phone with you if you track your route. And perhaps when you do your workout outside, you don't have to really think about the GPS movement there, like an outdoor run or an outdoor bike. Now, I tested both these watches side by side in terms of the GPS accuracy, and the result was that both the GPS on both these watches were actually kind of similar. There's little variance between the two, so you don't have to worry about GPS tracking on these two watches. On the Fitbit Sense, it took slightly longer to lock on the GPS settings, close to a minute actually, when I was doing an outdoor event, but the Apple Watch is near instantaneous to lock on to the GPS setting. Both have heart rate measurements, but let me be clear here, the heart rate measurement for both devices are a little bit different. Let's start with this possibility where you are in the middle of a workout. You can keep an eye on the heart rate on the Apple Watch Series 6 that's reading your BPM reading or your beats per minute reading, and the Fitbit does the same, but it does give you a notification when you enter into a different heart rate zone. This will perhaps change how you move from aerobic to anaerobic, and this could be useful if you're doing something like training for a high impact workout, like HIIT for example, and you want to make sure that the heart rate stays within that limit peak for a certain set amount of time. That can only be found on the Fitbit Sense. I'm pretty sure you can find a third-party app on the Apple Watch, but it's not native towards the iOS device. The Fitbit will also notify you accordingly if you enter into a different heart rate zone. On heart rate data during a workout, both watches does give you an idea of what your heart rate information will be on your screen. But after having done several outdoor activities on both devices, I feel that the Fitbit Sense was definitely lagging behind the Apple Watch that was tracking me for at least the first 10 minutes of my workout. I don't have a heart rate strap on me, so I really can't measure both sensors based on accuracy on the heart rate. But at the end of the workout, all things said and done, things did start to even out when it comes to the end of the workout. So the heart rate monitoring between the Fitbit Sense and the Apple Watch kind of ended up being the same. So essentially, from the way I look at it, it becomes a little bit more sensible for you to just take it in terms of aggregate instead of the accuracy per minute per beat. So think about it as a general term, and if you even out the averages, it's going to work out just fine. That's what I feel. But again, I can't verify this because I don't have a heart rate strap that I can use to actually monitor the heart rate per se with accuracy. But for now, I think the heart rate monitoring is okay for both, just that the Fitbit Sense has a little bit extra in terms of the heart rate monitoring zone. So that is something to keep in mind when you do something that is cardio-based workout. Moving along, to see your stats at the end of the session, you can jump on the Apple Fitness app, or you can take a look at the Fitbit app on the other devices. On preference, I do like the Fitbit app because it breaks down the information better, as it is highly visual, really easier to find your details that you're looking for, like the splits if you're doing for a run, or as well as an overlay of your heart rate zone on a map, which I like a lot. And of course, there is this feature where there's also the heart rate zones in general, which is great to allow you to plan your workout for the better. The Apple Watch gives you the same data, but its presentation is perhaps less visual compared against the way the Fitbit does. You tend to work out at the end of the day how it works best for you. So moving along to the presentation, both of these watches look fairly similar from the outside. Both of them feature a square display, and of course both of them have an always-on clock face, and that means you don't necessarily have to constantly raise your wrist to see the time or your workout matrix. And although you can turn off the always-on feature to preserve battery life, normally people just keep the always-on feature on because that's the whole purpose of us having an always-on watch anyway when you buy these kind of devices. Both of these watches are fairly easy to see in broad daylight, which is a thing in Malaysia. If you want to do an outdoor workout outside a lot in broad, bright daylight like we do get in Malaysia, it's a little bit tricky to see the kind of data and the kind of screen on your watches, but quite honestly, I found that both of these to be really good and can see in bright daylight. The Apple Watch comes in two different sizes, a 40mm or a 44mm version. We're all familiar with this. This is pretty much the same as all the previous versions as well. And the Fitbit Sense comes in just the one square size face. But of course, the build is actually quite nice. There's a lot of metallic steel around it. And of course, the glass is actually quite good. I haven't gotten any scratch yet on it. So it does give you an idea of the durability of the build of both these watches. Both of these have interchangeable straps, so you can customize your look and feel, and you have the ability to just press that quick release button, so it's really simple to swap in and out of the straps or to change up the look if you want to. If you're going to be doing an active workout, you might want to change out the silicone strap. Also, if you want to do some water activity, that might be an idea. So if you have that quick release button, it's actually quite easy to swap in and out. Both of them are of course water resistant. I've even gone on a 5-meter deep with my Apple Watch Series 5, not Series 6, and it works just fine afterwards. And that was, by the way, that story was more of me forgetting that I was wearing my watch, so I decided to just not dive deeper, just maintain that 5 meter just to, until I get to the boat. But I was expecting my Apple Watch Series 5 to conk out after that, but it didn't. So I guess even if you go for diving for about half an hour at 5 meters, the Series 5 can do it. I probably won't try it with the Series 6, but it gives you a good idea of what the capacity of these watches can perform underwater. Navigating the watches, of course, is very easy, especially if you've never owned a watch before or a smartwatch before. They both have touch screens, and obviously you can change the settings and interact with the face of these kind of watches accordingly. But the Apple Watch does come with a digital crown and a side button. These are physical buttons that you can press, but on the Fitbit Sense, there's no physical button. It's just a side haptic button that vibrates to give you some sort of feedback whenever you press it. Because it's not a physical button, you might need some time to get used to it. Now, it does buzz when you press it, so again, it does give you the information that you've indeed pressed the button accordingly when you want to do something with the watch using the haptic button. The Fitbit Sense has a variety of third-party watch faces, as mentioned before, that you can choose from, as well as first-party Fitbit options. So you have plenty of options to change in and out of the app. The Apple Watch has plenty of watch faces. Many of them are actually quite good, but not just that. If you, again, are not familiar with the kind of Apple Watches out there in the market, there's this thing called complications that you can choose from, and you can get it on the Apple Watch. So it kind of cancels out each other in terms of the plenty of options for watch faces for Fitbit Sense versus not so many that you can get on the Apple Watch, which is already a lot, by the way, but you can actually improve on the complications that you can get on the Apple Watch. Again, the complications are actually quite critical and quite important for you to use. So those are the kind of I guess user interface that both have, and I guess no one comes out on top in terms of this feature. Let's go on to the smartwatch features. So the first thing you'll notice when you're interacting with these watch faces is that the Apple Watch Series 6 is really responsive, really fast, and really sensitive. You don't have to press it twice or thrice in order for you to want something on the screen. Now, whereas the OS on the Fitbit Sense isn't quite that responsive and isn't quite that fast, there's a lag, especially when it comes to transferring things like new watch faces and stuff like that, or syncing to other apps. In fact, if you're sweaty after a workout and you press it, it might not work as sensitive as it were if both the watch and your fingers are dry. That is something that might take 20, 30, 40 seconds longer, so you might need to understand that the user interface of the Fitbit Sense is a little bit clicky compared to the smooth features that you can get in terms of the Apple Watch Series 6 in terms of interfacing with your finger. So overall, the Apple Watch Series 6 is a lot better and a lot smoother when it comes to user interface engagement. Meanwhile, both these watches are smartwatches, and because of that, they do receive notifications from the phone, whether you are on Android or on the iPhone if you're using the Fitbit Sense. But if it only, get this is the thing that I was alluding to earlier. If you are using the Fitbit Sense on an iPhone, it only allows you to respond to notifications if you are paired on an Android phone. So if you're an iPhone, you can't do much of that responding in terms of using responding for phone calls or something similar, but you can do more if you're on an Android. So there's a big downside. If you're using an iOS and you want to use the Fitbit Sense, big downside. But if you're already on an Android phone, so the Fitbit Sense works well there, you don't have to worry about this. Now on the Apple Watch, you're already on an iPhone, so you can respond to the notifications using a bunch of features, like responding through emojis, responding through scribbles, or even voice. Those kind of things is possible, and we've seen that for a few years now. And if you want to toggle the cellular version, I think Maxis is offering about 18 ringgit additional on top of the plan that you're already on, so you can actually listen to music or stream music on your Apple Watch. Just put on some earphones and off you go for a jog. You don't need your phone, you can just leave your phone behind. That kind of feature is actually quite interesting and can only be seen on the Apple Watch Series 6. You can't get this feature on the Fitbit Sense because, get this, and this is the weird part, Fitbit Sense doesn't allow you to store off data, songs or music on the watch itself. So I find that is a big downer. We'll get to that in a bit, but the Apple Watch 6 only has this if it's the LTE function or the cellular function. So if you want to have that kind of cellular function, make sure that you get the GPS plus cellular version, because that allows you to take calls, stream music. When you're away from your phone, you can leave your phone at home and run. That's not a problem. There's no function of this in the Fitbit Sense as mentioned earlier. You'll definitely need a phone together with you. Both have smart assistants available on both watches, Siri on the Apple Watch and Alexa and Google Assistant on the Fitbit Sense, but Google Assistant is not there yet. I only see the icon, but it's not highlighted. Perhaps they're going to introduce this feature later on. So all in all, the kind of features that you can get on these watches are quite interesting. But for me, that have been using the Apple Watch for a few years now, I might want to try out the Fitbit Sense to see how it's like. Perhaps I can even give an update whether or not I did like it after using it for a few weeks. Until then, thanks very much. Catch you next time.